Hello. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to the HumanistsMN February Community Gathering. My name is Ellie Hayland, and I'm president of the organization. Thank you for joining us, especially to any new visitors or new members. I always like to start with a little crash course in case you're new to humanism or to our organization. We are a secular community for ethical living, committed to the well-being of all and sustainability of the planet, and a home for those looking for a community of naturally curious, compassionate, and rational people. In short, we believe you can be good without a God. We are a very active organization, and we organize primarily through Meetup, so join us there and you can see a wide variety of events that we have. We are currently an all-volunteer nonprofit, and we depend on the service and generosity of our members and friends to further our mission. If you are not already a dues-paying member, we encourage you to take that step, and you can do that and learn more about us at our website, HumanistsMN.org. We also encourage you to find ways to get involved. We have several volunteer opportunities such as marketing, tech, social action, and a ton more. Additionally, we will be holding elections this spring for a few board positions. And if you're interested in exploring that opportunity, please see Mitch. Mitch, want to raise your hand? Or Audrey? There, during the reception, and they can give you more information about that. They're a part of the nominations committee. For today's Q&A session with our speaker, we'll be taking questions via note cards. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and someone will come around and give you a card and a pen. And then when you're finished writing your question, raise your hand again, someone will gather it, and then we'll have that Q&A part after our speaker. A bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are out the door and to the left or downstairs and also to the left. The reception will begin around 4:30, maybe a little earlier. Then we'd love for you to stay and socialize, connect with others, learn more about the organization. And we will be providing food and drinks, and we encourage you to consider making a contribution to help us cover the costs. And a disclaimer that there may be photos and video taken today that may be used for promotional and marketing purposes in the future. Up next, Humanists in Action co-chair, Christine Redqua.
Thank you, Ellie. Glad to see you all here, and I'm liking the look of the chairs. There used to be pews in here. This looks good. I like it. Thanks to First Unitarian Society. I am Christine Redqua, the co-chair of the Humanist in Action Committee. Humanist in Action, what does that mean? We do a few different kinds of things. One is community service projects. And every month we've got a couple going on out. Sometimes they're in-house here, a range of organizations that we support. Another activity is advocating for the world we want to see. There are laws and regulations, and that does guide things. Most of the time, we're in challenging times now. And if people don't speak up and assert what they do want to see, it won't happen. So that's why we encourage you via a newsletter that the co-chair Marcy and I write. Every week or two, we'll send an alert on here's some things that you can reach out to your legislator because they need to know. I know it's important for us to talk amongst ourselves and express how we feel, but that doesn't make change. When we act publicly in some fashion, that's what makes change and helps us have the world we want to see. Another thing that I've been involved in is, some of you may know, about a year and a half ago, HumanistsMN sponsored a family of 3 from Ukraine. They came over on a humanitarian parole authorization. And you may have seen news about immigration and what's going on. And there is one specific program, not theirs, that has been explicitly terminated. They were here legally for a duration. They've now been terminated. It's very unclear the status for this family. They've applied for an additional permission, and hopefully that will make them immune to deportation, but we don't know. And so they are applying for they're applying early for a renewal of their existing status. They applied for another one, but it costs money. It's surprising to me. And with a family of 3, that's $1,800 to apply for the status coming up. And another one was $1,000, so for work permission. So, but they're a low-income family. So we have a GoFundMe page, It's on our 2 Facebook pages, and if you want the link and want to go out to the GoFundMe, we sure would appreciate it. They would very much appreciate it. What else they told me today? I don't know if you've had a problem estimating how much taxes you need withheld. This is their first full year of working. They didn't estimate it so good. So he has an extra debt. They have an extra debt. So challenges. This is what it is to be a low-income family. So please, in some way or another, please do what you can to help our world be humane and humanist. And happy to talk with you out at the back table. We have postcards. We have postcards to advocate to your legislature. So please come back and see me at the back table to encourage them to live a secular, legislate in a secular fashion. That's the message on these, or you can create your own message. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Audrey.
Okay, hi everyone. Before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to tell you about a couple of upcoming events we have going on. Well, first of all, most months, the third Saturday of the month, we are here with our guest speaker and community gathering. And so next month, March 15th, we've invited Crystal Jackson, who is a cyber security and AI specialist who's going to be coming to speak to us. And she also happens to be a board member of the American Humanist Association. And she is very concerned and has been working on questions about how AI is being developed and that more humanist values are being taken into consideration. She's very concerned about that. And so we're really looking forward to her talk next month, right here in this space, March 15th. Then in April, we are not going to be here in April. We'll be here on the first Saturday for our Secular Saturday series, but we will not be here for our community gathering because the American Atheists, the National Atheist Organization, is holding their annual conference right here in the Twin Cities that third weekend in April. And we helped them secure their keynote speaker of Keith Ellison. But he will be, their conference is like Friday through Sunday. He will be speaking on Friday afternoon. I just learned this about the American Atheists. They hold their convention every year on Easter weekend, whatever weekend that is. So that's the weekend it is. So on Good Friday, if any of you know that lingo, Keith Ellison will be speaking over at the Marriott downtown. And we're still negotiating with them because there is a cost to attend the convention, and it's lower for those in town. And so some of you may want, so watch for notices that we'll be sending out about that, how you can attend the conference if you're interested, but we're also negotiating with them to see if we can get like a special deal for our members and friends to be able to attend Keith Ellison's talk on that Friday afternoon, and then we wouldn't have anything on Saturday. So that's a little bit different for April, so just stay tuned, folks, and we'll be getting out the announcements as these events become clearer. So for today, I am so very pleased that we have Fish Stark with us from the American Humanist Association out of Washington, D.C., where they're located. Fish was just appointed as the new executive director of the AHA last fall, and he's really hit the ground running. For those of you who've been following AHA, the American Humanist Association, you can see that he is. He is an organizer, an educator, a social entrepreneur, and lifelong humanist. Fish is also a self-proclaimed developmental psychology nerd who is passionate about giving everyone the tools to live lives of meaning, service, and self-determination. Fish holds a master's in education with a concentration in child development and psychology from Harvard University and a bachelor's from Yale University with a certificate in education studies. Before joining the AHA, Fish was head of program and curriculum at an educational technology startup that helped children build self-confidence, positive mental health, and critical thinking skills. And prior to that, he served as the director of programs at Peace First, a global nonprofit that provides training and funding to youth social justice activists. Fish lives in Annapolis, Maryland, where he is also a local political activist, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Annapolis, and serves on several nonprofit boards. Finally, you may be interested to know, as I was, that Fish moonlights as an award-winning stand-up comedian and has performed in 13 states. I don't know if we're going to see any of that humor today, but maybe we will. Anyway, as Ellie indicated, we've started a new practice. We're going to be taking questions, written questions, and so I have some Q&A assistants around the hall that will be wandering during Fish's talk, and you can just raise your hand and get a pen and a card from them, and then when you have it, again, raise your hand, and we'll collect the questions, and Nick will be asking the questions. So anyway, please join me now in welcoming Fish Stark to our gathering this afternoon.
Hey, humanists, it's good to see you. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, everyone who's been so welcoming so far, but more to the point, thanks to everyone for the work that I know it takes to build a big, thriving humanist community like this one. We at National like to think of HumanistsMN as one of our model chapters because of the incredible work that you all have done to build an intergenerational community, to build a community that is deeply, deeply active legislatively, and to build a place where people feel welcome and excited to take on the mantle and the identity of being humanists. So I'm here to do a few things today. In the next 45 minutes, I'll share a little bit about me. I'll share a little bit about what we're doing at the AHA, what those of you who are members are supporting, and what those of you who are interested in becoming members will hopefully join us to support. But also to do something that I think is really important in times like these where we feel the encroaching tide of Christian nationalism. One of my favorite speeches by humanistic Jewish hero Harvey Milk talked about the power of hope, right? That sometimes our work as leaders, whether it's in the political space or other space, is not just about delivering wins on policy, but really about delivering wins for the psyche, about giving people the hope and strength to move forward. Many of us have probably seen the movie and heard the quote, "You got to give them hope." The full quote talked about the power of hope for the kid in the closet in rural Pennsylvania, right? Or the person who has just found out they have a diagnosis of AIDS. That hope is something that gives us the ability to push forward and do the hard work in times of deep injustice. And so one of the things I want to talk about is what the data shows about why we can be hopeful in this moment for humanism. Why we're at, I think, and Audrey and I were talking about this in the car, why we're at sort of a golden moment, a precipice from which humanism could leap into something bigger because of where we are right now in America. We're at an intersection, I think, of people's needs and aspirations. Humanism has the opportunity to solve a lot of problems for people. And so I want to talk about what we're seeing and how we're taking action on that evidence. First, a little bit about me. I have had the incredible privilege for the last 5.5 months of serving as the latest executive director of the American Humanist Association. As a kid who grew up lonely and bullied, there's something particularly powerful for me about being part of an organization that really is about giving people a sense of meaning and belonging and especially mattering. One of my favorite things about humanism is that we believe in the inherent and limitless worth and dignity of people without them needing to be saved or redeemed. And as a former deeply argumentative kid, it is very exciting to be leading the American Association of People Who Agree with Me. I was also a sheltered kid growing up. My mother was afraid that all the intersecting, means of violence in the world would traumatize her child. And so, anyone ever play the card game War? We were not allowed to call the card game War. We had to call it Which One's Bigger? I didn't realize that not everybody called it Which One's Bigger until I went to school with a deck of cards and asked some of the other boys if they wanted to play Which One's Bigger. A lot of people ask me why my name is Fish, which is kind of a weird question because I don't really go up to people and ask, why is your name Audrey? But all the same. Fish is, as many of you might have surmised, not my given name. My given name is, get ready for this, Fortney Hellman Stark III. You know how some names just sound Republican? you hear my name and you're like, oh yeah, that's the name of the bad guy in the movie Milk. My dad, Fortney Hellman Stark Jr., who many of you know as Pete Stark, the first open atheist in Congress, and the former 2008 Humanist of the Year, loved the name so much that he went by Pete his whole life, the frickin' traitor. And loved it so much, in fact, that when he had a son, he named him Jeff. My older half-brother is named Jeff. But I guess when I was born, in line with the old Shel Silverstein poem, A Boy Named Sue, I think he wanted to teach me that life was hard and one had to struggle. So I was given the name Fortney Hellman Stark III. I didn't realize that name was a liability until I went to first grade. And if you want some tips for getting beat up in the first grade, go in with no athletic ability and a copy of the Babysitter's Club in your backpack and a deck of cards so you can ask the other boys to play Which One's Bigger, and a name like Fortney Hellman Stark III. I got my butt kicked up and down the first grade hallway because Fortney rhymed with Courtney, which was a girl's name, and therefore I was a girl. And I decided pretty quickly I was going to have to do one of two things, either change my name or learn to fight. And in my family, you could be anything you wanted to be. You could even be religious, but you had to be a Democrat and you had to be a pacifist. And also, I'm the only 29-year-old I know who wears Argyle socks, so even if I was willing to violate the commitment to pacifism, I don't think it would have gone very well for me. And so I realized I probably out of survival had to change my name, and so the name Fish came from my initials, F for Fortney, H for Hellman, S for Stark. I thought that was that sounds like a cool name. That sounds like a hip name. I bet a kid named Fish doesn't get bullied, which was wrong. But it was my dad. I'm sure felt a little twinge of frustration after going to all the trouble to get my mother to be convinced to name a child Fortney Hellman Stark III, which is the name of a 73-year-old man. But in the end, he acquiesced in part because he finally met a professionally employed person with the name Fish. He had a visit from a lobbyist for Kaiser Permanente named Fish Brown, and he comes home and he sets the guy's business card down on the kitchen counter and he says to my mother, Deborah, it's a real name. he needed to know I could get a job with benefits. But also because in my father's house, the one sin was limitation, limiting yourself or accepting the limits that others put on you. We believed deeply in my parents' house, not in God, but in people. In people as inherently powerful and inherently capable, in the power of collective action to solve problems, which my dad had learned as an anti-war activist and then put to use over his decades in the national legislature. And we believed especially in people as wells of potential to be unleashed, not pools of sin to be contained or limited or redeemed, or having their nature trained out of them. And so when I decided I wanted to chart my own course and self-determine with the name Fish, there wasn't really a whole hell of a lot he could say about that. And so those humanist values that I grew up with, the idea that all people matter deeply and equally, and that the highest good, the highest moral obligation is to fight to help other people live lives of freedom and flourishing, that the truth was something that we could prove and understand, not something that could be conveyed to us by authority. Those were the watchwords of our dinner table. And when I was 13, I learned that there was a word for what we believed, which was humanism. I wonder if folks in this room have also experienced the power of learning that there's a word for what you believe, which in a sense is really the power of learning that you're not alone. For me, that cemented the identity that I had. And then when I went to college, I was lucky enough to spend some time in the Yale humanist community working with a great Minnesotan named Chris Stedman, who at the time was the humanist chaplain at Yale. And it was, I think one of the wonderful things about humanism is that it has the power to be clarifying and to give us discernment, as we sometimes say as Unitarians. Right? One of the things I think we all struggle with in this world is understanding, well, which way shall I go? And humanism can offer us a set of values, models, inspiration to make those choices in a way that is true to ourselves and yet also binds us closer to this incredible community and this value system we're a part of. And so under Chris, I found myself reading more humanists, especially in my education classes. I glommed on to one of the original signers of the Humanist Manifesto, John Dewey. I had sort of since abandoned the idea that I was going to go to law school and become an ADA and run for office and all the things my older brother tried to do, and realized that I loved teaching and the life of the mind of the child. And Dewey's vision of an education system that was about more than rote knowledge, about more than just filling a child's head with facts and compelling them to be an obedient worker, but instead instilling a spirit of democracy and inquiry, that's what allowed us to unleash our brightest minds and build our strongest future, resonated with me. And so I ended up building a career in what I call applied humanism. In other words, I became an educator. I moved down to Appalachia, southern West Virginia, and worked with the Quakers to run a mentorship program in Boone County, which used to be one of the 3 wealthiest counties in America, is now one of the poorest. As Audrey said, I joined the team of a nonprofit called Peace First that was started by a Unitarian minister and a former Secretary of Education, and believed that we could train and fund youth activists around the world to build better communities. And we worked with thousands of young people in the US fighting against gun violence and white supremacy, but especially young people in the global South who were bringing, say, the first sex ed program that their rural village in Kenya had ever had, or organizing against autocracy in Nigeria. And from there, I found my way to graduate school, where I did a deeper dive into these questions about how we come to believe what we believe and how our beliefs shape us and shape action. And then ended up at a tech startup that was building apps to help kids build positive mental health at a time where young people are struggling more than ever to find that sense of wellness and purpose. So the company did well and we were acquired, but as often happens, we were acquired by a Republican multi-billionaire who was also a major bundler for Donald Trump. And I was going to be damned if I made that guy any more money. So I was trying to search for something that would bring together. I was worried that I wasn't going to find it. The part of me that never really left the family business and always loves, a good scrap over, I think, the political issues that matter. And the part of me that has always been concerned, since I was a little kid, about this question of how do we make sure that every person feels this sense of belonging and mattering and has the things they need to be kind to themselves, kind to others, and develop a kinder and more inclusive world. And that's when I saw the opportunity from a group whose magazine I had long read and whose conference I had once attended, and that I felt myself immediately kin to here at the AHA. And so that was probably close to a year ago now that I sent in that first application. And again, I've been really excited these past few months as we've figured out how to fire up the humanist community in response to these big challenges we're facing. So I want to spend the next half an hour or so talking about what we think it will take to grow humanism in a substantive way, if I can get my computer and the Wi-Fi to cooperate. Why we think it's possible right now in a way it may not be before, and what tactically and concretely the AHA is doing that you are funding with your membership dollars if you're a member, or that you will hopefully fund with your membership dollars if you become a member. But I want to first talk about why. Because I think organizations often seek growth a little blindly. And I think it's hard for us to understand, what the purpose of growing humanism without a really strong sense of intent. To me, I think there are a few reasons beyond being right. And we can get a little wrapped up in how right we are, but the truth is people don't join movements because they're right. They join them because they offer them something. They offer them a way to feel purpose, to feel powerful. And you don't grow movements because you're right either. That's not why people are driven to do the really hard work of bringing people in. You grow them because you're trying to solve a deep need in the world. So there are a few things to me that answer the question of why. The first is that we have a deep crisis of wellness in America. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. But we all see this in our homes, in our communities, and in our schools, the skyrocketing rates of social isolation and of depression and of anxiety. And one of the things we know, one of the things anyone who has studied the humanistic psychologist knows, some of the things we know innately, the things I found to be true, building innovations that improved children's mental well-being, is that having a strong value system and identity and community contributes to mental wellness. That's what we would do with kids before we would teach any of the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. We would talk to them about, well, what do you care about? Who are you and what matters to you and who can you count on? Because that's the stable base. Again, think about the way we felt when we learned there was a word for what we were, that humanism was an identity we could attach to. I know that, atheists especially are not joiners, but I think we all also know that people need a sense of identity to feel meaning and agency in the world. And I think we have the opportunity to offer it to a lot of people who are seeking it. I think that Donald Trump just talked at the National Prayer Breakfast last week about the idea that religion makes you happier. The religious right would love nothing better than to drill the idea into our heads that religion is the solution to this crisis of wellness. That if more people just went to church, if more people bought Trump Bibles, that we would see this national renewal of spirit. But I'm a researcher and I like data. And what we know from the data is that, sure, if you just slice it down as simply as possible, religious people are happier than secular people. That goes away if religious people are not involved in an active congregation. It's not faith that makes you happier, it's community. And people with a strong secular identity, say people who strongly identify as atheists, are just as happy as any religious person and much happier than people with weak religious affiliations. Again, it's not faith that makes you happy. It's having something to belong to. It's having a group of people, even if you don't see them every day, that you can identify with through a sense of common humanity. And so in growing humanism, there's this opportunity for the tens of millions of secular people in America who are statistically more adrift and more lonely, to give them something that matters. Another thing that we don't talk about a lot, that we're going to start talking a lot more about at the AHA, is that we live in two Americas when it comes to secular rights. You've got blue bubbles, like, where I live in Metro DC or Los Angeles or New York or maybe even Minneapolis, where the truth is it's not controversial. It's not dangerous to be a secular person. And then we've got places like Boone County, where I used to work, where the church often is people's access to food or to healthcare or to community, where and there's a great researcher by the name of Dina Abbott out of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln who has studied this, that there are people who are atheist only to themselves and who feel compelled to attend church, who have to be silent about what they believe because they fear for their livelihoods or even their lives. It's important to grow humanism so that the people who are living under the thumb of religious oppression in our own country understand that they're not alone, understand that they're safe, have places to go, and that we can be organized to fight so that ultimately everyone is as comfortable living openly, secularly as we are. And the third reason is collective action. Ultimately, we know even beyond secular issues, humanists make damn good policy. Whether it's, the work that my dad did to pass the EMTALA bill so that you could be seen in an emergency room without being asked if you were able to pay, or the COBRA bill that allows you to keep your health insurance when you're laid off from your job, or have a divorce, or Jared Huffman, our next open humanist in Congress, his work to protect our natural resources, to hold polluters accountable as the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, or Jamie Raskin, who identifies as both Jewish and a humanist, his work to defend our constitutional liberties and church-state separation. The truth is, when you advocate for public policy from a place of respecting science and reason and respecting all people, we can do a lot. And the stronger we are, and I think Minnesota and what you all are doing is a great proof point of this. The more organized we are, the more we can demand of our legislators to get more humanist policy. So that's why we're talking about growing humanism. And the question is, why are we positioned to grow right now? Now, these charts are a little too small, but one of the things I don't think is going to surprise anyone is that over the last 10 years, we've seen the number of religious Americans grow by between a quarter and a third. We're up to about 30% of Americans who identify as secular. One of the ways I like to describe it is we are the largest religious minority in America. We may not be organized like it, but we sure as hell are. And while a lot of folks describe themselves as nothing in particular rather than humanist or atheist or so forth, that rate has remained largely steady. The number of people who are willing to describe themselves as openly atheist or agnostic has doubled in the last 10 years. And let's make no mistake, that is due to the incredible work of activists here, of activists like my predecessors at the AHA and FFRF and American Atheists and Americans United. Those are hard-fought victories that we can build on. One of the things that's also interesting about the data is of those, nearly 30% religious nuns, only about half of them will fully embrace, I don't believe in God. A lot of them about half are some flavor of agnostic and questioning, which to me makes very clear that we need a container for people that is bigger than just atheism. Now, I'm a proud atheist, and I don't have any problem saying it, and I think that there are many people who share the values and the principles of our movement who just self-describe as agnostic or even deist, who we can bring in under a fold of humanism that is about affirmative belief. Now, we're seeing this growth in the way people's ideas are changing, and we're also seeing that this is stable and not just housed in the youngest generation, right? Gen Z is the least religious generation in American history, and that is still true even as the charlatans on the right, like J.D. Vance and Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, try to pipeline young men into radical Christianity, still the least religious in American history. But the biggest growth in people's lack of religion has happened in millennials, has happened in this, I don't know if I can point with a, okay, I can't get this clicker to work. In this 30 to 49 group, and we know that when social change is happening that spans more than one generation, it makes it more durable. So there's this opportunity, and then we look at why people are leaving religion, and the exciting thing is that there's a diverse source of reasons that people are living, but a lot of them speak to humanism. Loss of trust and credibility in former leaders. We're seeing a lot of people who were tenuously religious feel that it's okay to move away, and maybe it would help if there was an affirmative identity they could be a part of. We see a lot of folks who are having a strong break with religion because of a traumatic event, which we know is something that we have really strong. Recovering from Religion is a great organization that I know a lot of us support, a lot of humanist groups support. One thing I like to highlight, because we get questions a lot about, well, why the hell is the AHA so focused on LGBTQ rights and trans rights? How is that a humanist issue? And I have to point out, well, number one, it's a humanist issue because it's always been a humanist issue. You can go back to John Stuart Mill talking about the tyranny of custom and the need for experiments in living, right? We don't just believe in civil liberties. We believe in expansiveness in the ways that you can constitute a life and a family. We believe that it is good for people to live differently and diversely, not just something that should not be inhibited. But also, yes, we believe in it because it's right. Also, I can read a graph. And the truth is that the one of the most prominent reasons that young people, but people of all generations, are leaving religion is because of negative religious teachings about the treatment of LGBTQ people. And that's one of the reasons we've embraced and prioritized a strong defense of LGBTQ rights. Because if I'm the chairman of PepsiCo and I have research that says people are not drinking Coke because it's too sweet, then I'm gonna get my scientists working on making more, less sweet Pepsi. So we've got a lot of opportunities that are driving people away. And we've also got this opportunity where religious or secular people are looking for and needing some kind of meaning and community. And they're not getting it, not just from religion, but from any of the sources that they used to. There is a crisis of faith right now in some of the institutions that people have trusted to protect them. There's certainly a crisis of faith in the Democratic Party right now. People are looking for something different from the activist groups and the communities that they've used to be a part of. But especially when we look at the data on, this is a recent study out of Harvard, on young adults' mental health. The number one driver of poor mental health in young adults is lacking meaning and purpose, even more than financial worries. And we all know how stretched millennials are more than ever, what with eggs being freaking $8 a carton and houses being, I don't know what they are here in Minneapolis, but I can tell you in Maryland, it's not so great. Between the 60% who experience lack of meaning and purpose and the 50% who feel they lack direction and the 51% who feel like they can't build an identity outside of what they achieve, the truth is, what we've seen in the past few years is people have been responding to this crisis of meaning, these snake oil salesmen like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, who come in and promise an answer, promise an identity, and say, oh, hey, the way to feel a sense of meaning and purpose is from this cheap high of superiority. By deciding that you're going to feel strong by choosing who to hate. And the truth is, humanism has always had different and better answers. Answers that are more sustaining, answers that are stronger, answers that say our meaning and purpose comes from service. And our agency comes from ourselves, that we are the ones that we have been waiting for, and we don't need to wait on someone's permission or someone's divine intervention to allow us to feel that we can make a difference in the world. We've got this lack of purpose and direction, and we've also got this crisis of loneliness. We've got 3 in 10 millennials that feel lonely. We've got 57% of men and 59% of women who say they feel lonely sometimes. We've got what former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who we suspect is a humanist, and we're trying to see if he'll accept a Humanist of the Year award, called a loneliness epidemic. And it functions like an epidemic in that it can spread and infect communities that have markers of social isolation. So you've got people who are feeling more dispossessed because we live in a world where our votes are diluted by corrupt and racist systems, and our paychecks don't go as far, and our families have moved further away, and we are meeting and seeing fewer friends, and we are feeling less of a sense simply that we matter. And we see that people are not merely resigned to this, but they're seeking out answers. We see that 21% of Americans are thinking daily about how to find more meaning and purpose in their life. Another 21% are thinking about it weekly. Less than a quarter are saying they never think about it. And while book sales are down, self-help book sales are up. People are looking for answers to the crisis of meaning and purpose and loneliness. And look, humanism is a philosophy that is specific. We don't offer the answers to everyone. We don't offer answers necessarily to people who are really committed to belief in the supernatural, or to people who are not sold on the idea of the equal worth and dignity of every person. But there are tens of millions of people in America who think like us, and we can offer that meaning and direction for them. So what then do we do? That's the question I want to talk about in the last 15 minutes that we have. What is the AHA tactically doing to solve this problem and build strong humanist communities around the country? You know, the new atheist movement was really great about giving us something to fight against. It was great at galvanizing people to rebel against the tyranny of religion and some of the closed-mindedness of the religious right. And the truth is that there's only so long you can sustain the sugar high of adversarialism. And the truth is that one of the things that we need to do as we sustain and grow as a humanist movement is figure out how humanism can be something to believe in, something to belong to, and something to fight for. You know, when it comes to something to believe in, I think, again, people are looking for an identity that gives them clear guidance for their life and a sense of meaning, and that makes them feel good and generous. Even the Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro school of thought relies on the feeling that you are accountable, maybe just to your subgroup of white men, but that you are accountable to other people and part of a broader movement. Now, we believe something bigger than that. We believe in Vonnegut's ideal that we are healthy only so far as our ideas are humane. And so one of the things that we have to acknowledge as a movement is that we are really good, really, really good at helping people who want a master's level education in humanism get it. We're helping people who want to be professional humanist leaders and literally take, classes at the, what's the seminary here in Minneapolis? United, yes. I was confusing it with Union, which we were talking about. At United, you can earn courses, or you can earn credits towards an MDiv at United through courses you can take with the American Humanist Association. But what we need and are building is a focus on entry-level humanism. Things that people who are curious, who are Googling, I don't believe in God, what can I believe in, can do in minutes a day to help them feel a deeper connection to an understanding of humanist thought. Just last week, we launched a text series, text that people can get to their phone with humanist quotes that come through 3 times a week, helping people reflect and feel a deeper connection to humanism in the style of a devotional, right, that asks you to reflect on and consider more deeply the Christian faith. We've built a parenting community that we launched a few weeks ago because we know that one of the urgent needs for the many religiously unaffiliated parents is understanding, how do I give my kid a sense of values without the traditions that I was raised with that involved going to Sunday school? And we're going to start competing with the religious right on their turf, which is on the internet and in forms of new media. The truth is, we know, and we have always known, politics is downstream from culture, and that means these days, if we want to win in the courts, we have to win on the internet. And we have to go into the spaces where, again, this what's it called? It's not the Broniverse. It's the manosphere. There you go. I said Broniverse, and this guy knew where I was going. We have to go in the places where the manosphere has established dominance and offer people something to shake them out of that. The truth is, a lot of the manosphere grew off of the back of the online community that Sam Harris had built, which was not necessarily dedicated to those ideals. But the thing is, nature abhors a vacuum, and when you have a lot of people looking for meaning, they're going to find somebody who's offering it to them, even if what they're being offered is nonsense. So we are hiring communication staff at the AHA who are going to, within the next few months, help us launch TikTok and podcast content that is not primarily just about what the religious right is doing, although we will criticize their excesses because outrage is a good way to get attention, but is really going to be about what it means to live humanistically, how humanism can help us find that meaning and purpose and offer it to the people who heretofore have only had these religious right charlatans to try and tell them about it. In terms of something to belong to, we're going to be increasing our capacity to support and build local groups by 150%. We're hiring staff right now who should be onboarded by the beginning of next month, who are going to work on helping the dozens of, hundreds, because we've got about 250 right now, of humanist groups around the country achieve the strength and spread that a group like HumanistsMN has had through better trainings, through helping cultivate new generations of leadership, helping new groups get off the ground, and replicating the best practices you all have established across the country. We're going to be doing targeted outreach to the groups we think are likely to have high rates of humanist engagement, whether it's Unitarians or effective altruists or the LGBTQ community. We've launched a digital community that is open to all AHA members, and we're going back to having an in-person conference, which will be in Chicago this year, and is going to be about the humanist tradition of new ideas that move America forward. Just as humanists invented the idea of the secular public school, or women's reproductive rights, or popular science, we are going to be throwing open the doors to new ideas rather than in-group dialogue, so that people who find themselves new to the humanist movement can see interesting articulations of our principles rather than rehashing the same debates that we've had for the last 30 years, which I'm sure we could all replay in our heads. And the final thing is that, I think one of the things that I was lucky to come into at the AHA was a really strong political operation. The truth is, we've got our community's version of the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund. We've got a PAC that has been working for over a decade to help humanists get elected to office, to the point where when my father came out, we had only one state representative in the entire country who identified as non-religious. Now we have over 75, and we just went at the beginning of this Congress from one member of Congress who identified as non-religious to 3, and I talked to another one a couple days ago who I think we've got on the verge of coming out as well. That is because of the work the AHA's political operation has done. We're going to continue. Well, thank you. We're going to work over the next few years to double the size of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. This is our team of Avengers in Congress that work for church-state separation, that one of my predecessors, Roy Speckhart, helped start in Jared Huffman's living room with him and Jamie Raskin and Jan McNerney and Dan Kildee, and he says a bottle of wine. I think it was a couple bottles of wine. But this group that has been the voice of religious pluralism on Capitol Hill and has been leading the charge in response to the Trump administration's setbacks. But in addition to what we've been doing, the rapid response efforts that call out hypocrisy, organizing members of Congress to support our work, we're going to be expanding more rapidly into state advocacy. Many of you know Sarah Levin, who works with our Center for Free Thought Equality to drive bills in Minnesota and Colorado and a couple of other key states that advance priorities like secular recovery options or ending health or regulating healthcare sharing ministries. Sorry, I gave away the next stage of the plan. We also are going to be working more in red and purple states to try and defend against the raft of Christian nationalist legislation, including and especially school voucher bills that send our public tax dollars to unaccountable private schools, which, by the way, those kind of voucher schemes failed in Kentucky when they were on the same ballot as Donald Trump. So we know this is an issue where we can build common cause even with people of faith. We're going to be expanding into state advocacy, not just because that's where we think we can win real victories and stop the religious right from trying to press their advantages, but also because that state-level advocacy is where we can train more humanist leaders to be citizen advocates, and where we need to show people in red states that there is a movement willing to fight for them, because before somebody wants to join you, they have to see that you're willing to show up for them and their rights. And finally, we are rebuilding the Appignani Humanist Legal Center to focus not on the Establishment Clause issues, not on who's put a Christmas tree in the public park, but on the very real employment and healthcare discrimination that atheists and humanists are facing, especially in rural America. Our job, our goal is to be the bulldog that steps in whenever someone is discriminated against because they are an atheist or a humanist, and brings to light for people around the country that secular activism is more than a luxury belief. It is more than being reactive against displays of religion we don't like, but it is about protecting people who, again, still in the United States today, in the land that George Washington talked about as a beacon not just of toleration, but of the freedom of conscience, can be fired from their jobs or can lose their kids in a court custody case because they don't go to church. We're going to be taking that on directly through the Appignani Humanist Legal Center. That's what we're trying to give people to belong to, believe in, and fight for. And so I've got, I want to end a couple minutes early to take your questions, but I'll close with this. The writer Anne Lamott has said that all prayer boils down to two things. One is thank you, thank you, thank you, and the other is help me, help me, help me. Now I'm not a praying person necessarily, but I will cop to having done one just in case before certain tests that I was underprepared for, before I asked my fiance to marry me, or and so I'll not a prayer, but I'll make some ministrations to you right now. The first is thank you, thank you, thank you. Again, for having me, for choosing, because it's a choice, to be a chapter of the AHA and support our work in this way, and for all that you've done to build what really is the most thriving community of humanists I'd have the pleasure to speak to in the last 6 months. And the second is help us, help us, help us. You are seeing right now that, again, we are on the precipice of being able, I think, to expand humanism dramatically in reaction to the oppression that people are facing, the disillusionment that they're facing in institutions that they trusted to fight for them, and the need that they feel for meaning and purpose and community. We've got an ambitious agenda that we think will do that, will build that community and advance our rights, and we've got a team of people who are working nights and weekends to make that happen, and we are trying to pay them fair wages. And when you join the AHA, whether you give us $1 a year or $45 a year, or whether you're an even more generous donor than that, you help support the work that people are doing to build these programs and ultimately to build a movement that can demand better in America and give people the gift that we all have of this connection and identity. So that's my ask to you. That's my thanks to you. And I'm really looking forward now to hearing your questions, and especially to getting to know more of you one-on-one after. And I guess I'm looking for Nick, who's going to have some of the questions to ask me. Hey, Nick.
All right, thank you, Fish. Appreciate that. I'm going to start off with a couple shorter ones, logistical a little bit here.
Yeah,
Ready?
hit me with them.
All right, here's one. Is being a member of HumanistsMN the same as being a member of an AHA? Maybe that means like a dues-paying membership, or just in concept.
Great question. It is not. And it's a good thing to know, because a lot of people think because they are members of their chapter, they are members of the AHA. You become a member of the AHA by paying dues. Standard dues are $45 a year, but we have memberships for couples and low-income memberships. Membership in the AHA entitles you to a few things: discounts on our conferences and educational programs. You get our magazine. You can vote on members of our board, including re-electing the amazing Ellie Hayland, who's just become one of my bosses on the AHA's board. And of course, you support the work that our team is doing around the country. So you can become a member at AmericanHumanist.org. Certainly, people are welcome to engage in our programs, whether they are a member or not. But I hope that those of you who are here and are excited, that some of you are moved to sign up and become a member in one way or another. We also offer free memberships for college students.
Cool. All right, another last operational one, I think, here. How is the financial health of the AHA, and how does that look like going forward?
It's a great question. So I'll try not to get too ticky-tacky, although this is where my brain is, this is the life of an executive director. This is where my brain lives. We are really lucky as a movement. My predecessors and our boards have built a really financially strong AHA. So we are about $2.5 million organization budget-wise that is trying to grow this year into a $3 million organization, and we are on track to do it based on our budget numbers. We have 9.5 months of cash in the bank and about 3 years of operating capital in an endowment. And so we're lucky that we don't rely on a small number of mega donors, but instead we have over 15,000 regular donors, the vast majority of whom renew each year, and new ones are being added nearly every day. So we have a strong base that is going to allow us to grow if we do it responsibly and sustainably. And I just want to say, because I know there are members in the audience who are contributors, thanks, because it makes it really easy to have these conversations I'm having right now about hiring people when I can say, oh yeah, don't worry, we're going to be able to keep the lights on and you're not going to have to worry about, do we have enough money to pay your next check?
Awesome. Next up, how does the AHA plan to connect outside of the AHA in terms of both, one, organizations trying to organize political power and community, and two, individuals, especially young people?
Absolutely. How are we going to connect outside of the AHA? Humanists love to talk, but we do a lot of talking to each other. We love to talk, and we do a lot of the talking to each other. A lot of what we're going to be doing as we launch these new media properties is going into spaces that are either adjacent to humanism or even diametrically opposed to humanism. I want to go on Fox News. I want to go on Joe Rogan. We are going to be going to the people who disagree with us and bringing our case directly to them. We'll be going on some of these manosphere, not Brotopia, podcasts to talk about what we think humanism has to offer. I think that the more that we can be talking about humanism, and not even humanism qua humanism, not just coming out and saying, I am a humanist, because a lot of people aren't humanists. And so if someone hears, well, I'm a humanist in this and that, they might say, okay, well, that's very nice for you. I don't see how it's relevant to me. But entering into conversations that people are having about politics, about culture, about meaning, about ethics, and saying what we believe, and then saying, I believe this because I am a humanist, is part of the blueprint that we think we have for introducing more people to humanism. One of the reasons that we're staffing up is so that we can build stronger relationships and partnerships within the secular space and the progressive movement more broadly. We've spent, and frankly, one of the things we've done well is we've spent the last number of years building really strong partnerships with people, especially in the reproductive rights movement, in the LGBTQ justice movement. Now it's our turn, as secular values are under attack, to say to those groups, hey, the rise of Christian nationalism affects all of us. We've been organizing this resistance, and here's what we need you to do. And so we're going to be working that partnership from both sides.
An episode of Joe Rogan I would tune into. Nice. Online resources may be fine, but showing up in person is so important for effective community. But younger people especially are not joiners. How can we get people to commit to come together in person?
It's a good question. I've been both an educator and an organizer, and the number one rule in both of those professions is you meet people where they are. You have to meet people where they are, not where you want them to go, not expect them to immediately adopt the mode of engagement. Now, I agree. I think that in-person community is the gold standard. I also think we have to recognize that for a lot of people, their reality is they're more comfortable engaging online. When I think about the online universe, I think about, I'm a big scholar of, I wrote my thesis at Yale on children's television. And I read a lot of the memoirs of Joan Gans Cooney, who created Sesame Street, who saw the sort of the evils and the perils of television and said, well, I can either rail against this or I can build something on this powerful medium that is worthy of its power. And so, she spent all this time bringing together Jim Henson and his Muppets and some of the best child development researchers and creating something that is, still seems to be some of the only television that's actually ever been good for children. And so our goal is to build the kinds of online communities that we think can be good for the humanist community and good for America broadly. And we think that, and we've got some models that we think show that this to be true in other places. We think that once people get comfortable engaging online and develop a sense of identity, it'll be easier to bring them out into in-person communities. Someone who joins the AHA Discord right now might not feel comfortable coming to an in-person meeting with dozens of people they don't know. Maybe once they've had a few conversations online, they might start asking the question of, how do I find my local humanist group? And that's when we'll be there for them. The goal is always to build a glide path for people to come into these communities, because that's where more sustainable relationships can be built. But we have to do a better job of building on-ramps for the people who are humanist curious before they're humanist committed.
You might have touched on this, but the question is, what is the best message for recruitment strategy to help more people get on board with humanism?
What is the best message for a recruitment strategy? It's a good question. And I don't want to seem evasive here, but honestly, the best message has always been a personal story. a story of how you found humanism, what it means to you, and the role it plays in your life, the way it gives you community and purpose. Now, that's something that we can do much better on an interpersonal level than an organizational level. I think organizationally, we've got to talk about humanism as an antidote to a lot of things that people are feeling. Again, my favorite thing about humanism is the idea that, in contrast to many traditional religions, we see people as self-evidently good and not needing to be saved or redeemed. A lot of people are looking for that right now. A lot of people are looking for that sense that they matter outside of their achievements or their earning power or their, or the level of acceptance they have or don't have from their birth family. And I think one of the things that is going to be really powerful in talking about humanism is that we believe in people. That's what I've been saying when I've been asked to talk about humanism. It's, yeah, we don't believe in God, but the primary thing that binds us together is that we believe in people. Not just in their goodness, but in their potential, in our ability to find truth through the scientific method, and our ability to build better societies through organizing and smart public policy, and our ability to love one another and build amazing families and communities and lives through empathy and curiosity. I think people are tired of the negativity, but they're looking to hear something real in response to it. And I think the more we can talk about the fact that we are optimistic about people at a time where everyone feels a little more divided and a little more alone, but wants to be connected, that's one of the things that'll bring people in the best.
Speaking of people we want to bring in, who are our principal allies within the secular, religious, and oppressed communities? I'm going to try to summarize this one. And the difference of the idealist or the ideal allies there versus maybe the, quote, vulgar materialists, those maybe TERFs, race realists, that type of community who also identify as humanists at times.
The vulgar materialists. I like that. If somebody wants to self-identify, I want to give you a round of applause for that term. Whoever came up with that, well done, appreciate that. I think this is why having a sense of affirmative belief matters, right? I don't think all humanists are atheists. I don't think all atheists are humanists. And I think that part of what we need to do is lead really clearly with our affirmative belief system, which is number one, yes, about rationalism and the fact that we make decisions based on what we know and what we can observe. But it lives in a realm beyond rationalism, right? It's about realizing that maybe rationalism is the source of empirical truth, but empathy is the source of moral truth. That ultimately we realize that people are more than just collections of molecules, but that they have lives and ambitions and aspirations that matter and deserve to be known and understood. I think that I like to say we ought to have a very low bar for who we include and a high bar for who we elevate. I don't think there is a ideal or an unideal ally. I think anyone who's aligned with our principles should be invited to walk through the door. And frankly, I think people who are even 20 or 30 or 40% out of alignment with our principles should be invited to walk through the door. I'm a believer that if you believe 51% of what we believe, I want you at the table. But it looks like you had a little more to add to that.
Yeah, so the difference, for idealists, I mean people who have supernatural or abstract things, as opposed to materialists who are scientific and are thinking about the natural world. And so they observe the natural world to figure out their plans and decisions, as opposed to, let's say, a liberal or a utopian who is taking these abstract concepts from their mind and imposing it on the world.
Right, and I think this is,
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it was generally about idealists and rationalists and materialists and how we build. Yeah, I think the important thing is that AHA is a coalition org, right? We represent all forms of humanists, including folks who might describe themselves as more idealistic or religious humanists and more rationalist or secular humanists. And I think that there's got to be room for all of those sides of the equation at the table, and that we've got to speak to all of those groups' values. I think that sometimes we can lean too much in one or the other direction, and I think the truth is we've got to be creating content and organizing subgroups that can appeal to the needs and aspirations of both, and be clear about where our lines are, right? I think someone can be I don't think someone who says they're spiritual but not religious can automatically be assumed to not be a humanist, because the spirit can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. In fact, the spirit doesn't necessarily even have to be a mythical or a mystical or an unprovable thing. They could be talking about consciousness or the psyche, which those are things we know and understand and can research, even if you can't hold them in your hand. And so that's, I think we've got to throw the doors open wide enough. And we've also got to be clear about what we're not going to tolerate, right? Which is the denigration and dehumanization of people under the guise of science, or the idea that supernatural beliefs should drive public policy. I think those are good guardrails, and I think we want to welcome in anyone who sort of sits in between those.
All right, you might have just answered the question from online. We're streaming this on YouTube, speaking of, joining virtually. I think of myself as a Buddhist and a Unitarian. Would I be welcomed at the AHA?
Hell yeah, I'm a Unitarian. I am a card-carrying Unitarian raised by a Unitarian. I know there are plenty of people who are Buddhist. I think that if that's and to me, the fact that that is a question means we have to do a much better job as an organization talking about the pathways to humanism and the fact that humanism is deeply compatible with those kinds of traditions. So yes, whoever you are on the vast World Wide Web, you're very welcome and welcome in.
Next up, is the AHA trying to find our own oligarchs to compete against the Christian nationalist movement?
Trying to find our own oligarchs. Anybody in this room have $1 billion? Can I have it? Tactically speaking, we are going to have to raise money to do. The combined budget of all the organizations working in the formalized secular space in America is $20 million. Did you know that? $20 million. Now, what do you think the combined budget of all the organizations working for religious nationalism in the United States is? Would you like to guess? I would tell you, when you think about the Heritage Foundation and the different political arms of different religious organizations and all of the organizations operating in Trump world, we're talking about the billions of dollars. We are a David facing off against a Goliath. But the truth is, again, we are 30% of the population. We are the largest religious minority in America. One of the things that we're going to be working to do through the CFE and our PAC is replicate what we've seen the LGBT community and the Jewish community do really well, which is inspire people around identity-based giving. The truth is, humanists are some of the people in America most likely to make political contributions, and they tend to donate to politicians who support humanist causes. But they don't make those contributions as humanists per se, and that dilutes our power. Whereas, my partner, so my fiance is a secular Jew, and I'm a atheist Unitarian humanist. That means we are in an interfaithless marriage. She used to work at the organization J Street, which bundles donations from the liberal Jewish community to give to politicians. And so when Senator Smith or Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota gets a big check from J Street, they understand that came from the Jewish community, and they need to be accountable to the priorities of the Jewish community who gave the money to J Street that wrote the check. That's what we're aspiring to do with the Congressional Free Thought Caucus and our Free Thought Equality PAC, is make it so that humanists can do our giving to the causes and the people we would already do as humanists, so that the recipients of that giving understand these are humanists, and you didn't just get a donation from this person or that person, but this person who is a humanist, and they have a set of priorities that we need to be accountable to. So that's the thing that we're looking to do. And, we are always looking, not for oligarchs, but we are looking for people with means and generosity who want to be egalitarian participants in building this movement of humanism, who want to offer a little more than they have before, who want to give until, not quite give until it hurts, give until it feels good, and understand that they're doing that as part of a movement where their voice is treated at parity with the person who is giving $45 a year, and that's a meaningful contribution to them. And believe me, if anyone would like to be in that group, I would love to get your card after the talk.
All right, we got about time for probably 2 more. There's a couple questions in here we probably won't be able to get to, but obviously Fish is going to be joining us downstairs at the social event, so just keep those questions in mind. Back of the hall, not downstairs. Back of the hall, just right there. So just keep that in mind. What is the AHA doing to expand humanists outside of white folks? The country is more diverse than ever, and we need to reach out and go beyond our traditional secular grove.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So I think that when we think about what it takes to diversify movements, you don't just pull answers out of your behind, you look at what has been done. We are in the place that the environmental movement was in maybe 15 years ago, right? The environmental movement had a similar problem that humanism does, that it was largely made up of people who were white, who trended male, who tended to have a background as scientists. Question is, what do you do? Number one, you work to intentionally recruit and elevate leaders of color. It is significant that for the first time in AHA's history, our board president and vice president are women of color. That is work that we are doing to make sure that the voices of people of color are represented in our organizational decision-making, not token participation, but actually making sure that people have a seat at the table and real power when decisions are made and can build organizations that have priorities that reflect everyone. The other thing is we're going to have to think about the way that we talk and the messaging that we use. I'll give you an example. When I was working at that tech company that built mental health apps for kids, we were trying to build positive mental health in children before they went to middle school, which is where kids go off the anxiety cliff. Often that is referred to as social emotional learning. That's the term I used when I learned about that discipline at Yale and Harvard. One of the things we found anecdotally is that families of color, and especially new immigrant families, didn't identify with the term social emotional learning. They thought it was too academic. They didn't really connect with it. They worried that emotionality meant weakness. And so rather than just try and come up with what we thought the answers were, we actually looked at the data. We ran studies on what parents wanted for their kids and the words they used to talk about what it meant when their kid felt tough and resilient and connected with, a strong understanding of themselves. And we found that they used the word confidence. When we stopped talking about social emotional learning and we started talking about confidence, because we had done the work in roundtables and looking at hard data to understand how immigrant communities and communities of color talked about this aspiration they had, that's when we eventually were able to build a big movement and a big customer base. So one of the things we'll be doing with our expanded communications team is not just sitting around and be like, okay, well, what does Fish think about how we should talk about humanism today, but doing a systematic investigation and actually looking at data about how communities of color that are secular and that are progressive talk about their humanist beliefs and developing messaging stacks that are going to be more inclusive and speak to a larger vocabulary of people. Those are specific things that we can do. And the other thing that we're doing is that we're, continuing to make investments in and support as an organization that, relatively speaking, and again, a Space's total budget is $20 million, has some resources, we sponsor Black Nonbelievers Conference and we do our work to support Hispanic American freethinkers. We've got to make sure that the wealth that exists in our movement is flowing to the communities of color that are organizing, that understand how to bring in folks with shared backgrounds. That's not the full panoply of solutions, of course. There are more, I'm sure, that I don't know and would like to learn from those of you who are here, and I'd love to hear about your all's efforts to do this work yourselves, such as it is. And I think that we'll learn even more about that from walking the path together.
Kind of related to that, to maintain HumanistsMN, we're going to be targeting to hire some help, staff, paid staff.
Yeah.
That's one of the targets here. We need to do that to pursue or to make sure that we're sustaining this growing organization. How can the AHA help other local chapters, including HMN, to stay strong and to pursue those types of efforts?
It's a good question. And you guys have the answers to that, not me, and I'd like to hear them. Here's what we're going to be doing. One of the things that I think that we've done at the AHA that is true of a lot of organizations is we've underinvested in organizing staff. We are working right now to, I would say, increase by 150% are staff that is focused on helping and supporting local groups. Those groups those new staff members are mostly going to be focused on helping identify what is working for the groups that are growing and helping train the groups that want to grow in those best practices. Being able to say, hey, you know, Atheist United in LA has got 3,000 members. Well, gee, when I go up to San Francisco, the humanist community of Silicon Valley is about 25. Well, LA and San Francisco aren't that freaking different, right? So how can we figure out what is working in one place and training leadership in another place to do that kind of work? I think that one of the things that we've seen is that communities like this grow when there are strong leaders like Ellie. How do we find the next Ellies and the next Evan Clarks and provide them with the training and support that they need to grow into and to emerge as co-leaders? Because one of the things that we've seen that is hardest for chapters is when there's a strong leader who moves or who burns out or simply, cedes their time and there's not strong movement leadership built in behind them. Those are the kinds of things that we've always had the aspiration to do, but that frankly we haven't invested in the staff to make possible. And so our goal is to make sure that we're building that team so that when you come to us and you say, hey, I think we want to learn more about fundraising, or we want to learn more about recruitment, or we want some help planning this event, or we want you to direct more people to us, that we have the tools to provide that to you.
All right. Last one. Is there a way to access the presentation that you gave today, including the charts and all that good stuff? And how do you sign up for these 3 times a week quotes on the text messages?
It's a great question. It's on our social media, and I don't remember the link right now. There's a very clever web URL where you can go to sign up for these humanist texts. If you'd like to see the slides for the presentation, they're very bad. I threw them together on the plane. But if you would like to see my terrible design, let me know your email and I'd be happy to share it with you. The way to stay in touch with the AHA and find out about new programs, whether it is the texts or the online community that we're building or our conference or our educational webinars or anything else, is to follow, number one, to sign up for our newsletter, which is free. You can get it without being a member if you're not sold yet. AmericanHumanist.org is where you can sign up for that. And to follow our socials. We post multiple times a day on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and maybe something else. I can't remember whether we're on Twitter or not anymore. That's a cancer. But that's where we'll be sharing up-to-date information about programs and how you can get and stay involved. And so we hope that folks will follow us there. And if they're, and the other thing is, we are always happy to come and give talks, whether it's in person or virtual, or just chat with anyone about good entry points into AHA as a movement. There's also the online Discord that you can join where you can chat one-on-one with our staff or members and mentors on the internet. And so my hope is that we can build some stronger on-ramps for y'all that way.
All right. With that, thank you, Fish Stark.
Let's give one last round of applause to Fish Stark. Thank you so much. We're so grateful to have had you here today. And thank you all for coming. Just a reminder that this was streaming on YouTube and it will stay on our YouTube channel. And so if you want to see the slides or review it, you can also find it there on video. We will now have our reception in the back of the room. Please stay, chat. We would love to have people sign up to volunteer or just to learn more. Please let us know if you have any questions. And thanks again for coming today.